At the beginning of the 18th century, the global economy still operated primarily on a small and fragmented scale. Production work relies primarily on manual labor and the exploitation of natural resources. The majority of the population lived in difficult circumstances, having to work hard from morning until night. Long working hours and a high risk of workplace accidents. Therefore, humanity needed a revolutionary change, which led to the emergence of the first industrial revolution. With the advent of James Watt's steam engine system, every aspect of life underwent profound changes. The economy transitioned from agriculture to industry, and medicine too fell under the influence of these revolutions. Thanks to remarkable technological advancements, the history of this industry has entered new chapters with a series of proud achievements. What have these breakthroughs contributed to human treatment and health protection? Could it be that as science and technology advance hand in hand, we might completely transform our long-standing understanding of the human body? All will be revealed in the final installment of the History of Medical Development series. How much further will medicine advance? From the earliest dawn of civilization to the Renaissance era, humanity has continuously shaped and progressively modernized the field of medicine. However, due to rudimentary and insufficient equipment, doctors and researchers of that time were still unable to gain the most accurate perspective. When flaws remain unaddressed, the soul must be reborn once more into the mortal world. The smallpox epidemic ravaged Europe before spreading to Asia and the Americas, becoming a dangerous disease and the leading cause of death. At that time, the disease claimed the lives of approximately 400,000 Europeans each year on average. Given the limitations of modern medicine at the time, doctors and scientists believed the disease was entirely incurable. At that time, they had only one method: variolation, taking samples from individuals with mild smallpox to inoculate healthy people, thereby stimulating the immune system to develop protective immunity. However, this method had a high rate of illness and infection, inadvertently becoming one of the reasons smallpox spread across continents. Therefore, we need another method to once again defeat the god of death. Fortunately, the one chosen today did so on behalf of humanity. British doctor and scientist Edward Jenner, who lives in Gloucestershire, discovered a very unusual phenomenon. He noticed that milkmaids who had contracted cowpox became completely immune to smallpox. Could this cattle disease help protect humans from the pandemic? Therefore, the British doctor decided to investigate and test this idea. In 1796, he took matter from cowpox lesions on a dairymaid's hand and inoculated it into the arm of a healthy 8-year-old boy. Initially, the child only had a mild fever and fully recovered after just a few days. About 2 months later, Edward once again injected the smallpox virus into the boy. And miraculously, the child did not contract this dangerous disease. Even the doctor tested this method on his own 10-month-old son. After achieving success, he affirmed that his thesis was entirely correct and immediately began formulating the new drug. First, Edward took some cowpox bacteria and weakened them. He injects weakened germs into the patient's bloodstream, enabling their body to self-produce antibodies to fight off diseases. In 1798, successful experiments enabled the physician to publish his complete findings. Edward named this method vaccination, and it quickly came into widespread use throughout the world. The British government invited him to vaccinate the Royal Navy soldiers. Emperor Napoleon of France ordered the entire army to adopt Edward's method. Thanks to his invention, smallpox was no longer able to run rampant. Millions of lives were saved. From that moment on, Edward Jenner was honored as the father of vaccines, simultaneously laying a solid foundation for the field of immunology. Alongside these successes, the medical field of that era still operated based on numerous physiological viewpoints. The most typical example is before the 19th century, with infectious diseases such as plague, malaria, tuberculosis, or cholera. It was commonly believed that the cause was toxic fumes, miasma. People thought the air was polluted by excrement, waste, and toxic substances from industry. Therefore, throughout ancient times, the primary method of preventing disease was to avoid exposure to miasma, poisonous air. This situation persisted until the early 19th century. It was also around this time that surgical operations began to become common. and it can be implemented in all hospitals, from large to small. Not a few patients have been saved by this procedure, only to later die from post-operative complications. No one knew the reason why, let alone how to prevent that situation. Also during that period, in 1853, the Crimean War broke out between the Russian Empire and an alliance of Western nations, including Britain and France. Despite fighting with immense bravery, the British forces still suffered extremely heavy losses. On the battlefield, field hospitals are increasingly being established, where doctors work tirelessly day and night to rescue and treat wounded soldiers. Mary Seacole was truly a doctor who was wholeheartedly dedicated to her patients. Refused permission by the British Army to go to the front, she used her own money to establish a hospital to care for wounded soldiers. She cured numerous cases of cholera, yellow fever, and many other illnesses, helping the British military retain a portion of its manpower. Meanwhile, Florence Nightingale, a doctor with boundless dedication, was unable to achieve as much. Despite providing dedicated care and bandaging the wounds of British soldiers, 80% of her patients died from infection. This situation is extremely serious, raising major concerns regarding hygiene and safety assurance following the fire and explosion incident. Given that alarming situation, scientists and doctors have embarked on research. One such person was Joseph Lister. He realized that internal injuries, no matter how severe, could fully heal. For open wounds, patients are highly susceptible to severe infections, making treatment difficult and posing life-threatening risks. In 1865, Dr. Joseph happened to read a medical book which put forward the argument that the air contains various types of microorganisms, which are the agents responsible for both fermentation and putrefaction. This led him to question, could similar harmful agents be present in the air of operating rooms? This thought prompted the doctor to decide to remove them. First, he soaked the letter in carbolic acid, also known as phenol, and used an antiseptic gauze to treat the open wounds. For complex horn fractures with a high risk of infection, Dr. Joseph also used this substance to cleanse the wound. Then, use a sterilized gauze pad to bandage the wound. After regularly changing the dressing and cleaning the wound, he was surprised to see it dry quickly, with no more pus, and heal rapidly. Building on that success, Joseph Lister decided to spray phenol into the air to disinfect the entire operating room. At the same time, he also required surgeons to wash their hands with this solution to ensure the complete elimination of pathogens. However, in vapor form, carbolic acid is extremely toxic. Direct contact with the skin can cause itching and allergic reactions. Due to these limitations, Joseph's disinfection technique was later replaced by a more advanced method, the aseptic technique. The doctor's initiative was not initially supported by many, but it was later recognized and even implemented in many parts of Germany. And this also made Joseph Lister one of the greatest physicians in history, who is known as the father of antiseptic medicine. Yet his contributions profoundly changed our understanding of hygiene and disease, while paving the way for improved treatment methods for this illness. Now, let's take a brief look back at history. In the modern era, humanity learned how to use vaccines to prevent diseases and became more conscious of sterilization and disinfection. However, the most critical issue in treatment, identifying the underlying cause of the disease, remains unresolved. How does disease manifest in humans? What is the mechanism that causes them to develop and spread? In fact, this issue was thoroughly researched by many doctors and scientists of that time. Louis Pasteur was the pioneer who paved the way and laid the foundation for these works. Initially, he solely devoted himself to researching the fermentation process of alcohol. At that time, to produce this type of tin-glazed pottery, people would typically mix the glaze with grape juice or a solution made from sugar beets. But when soaked, all those solutions turn into sour vinegar. To address this issue, scientist Lewis observed under a microscope and discovered that small spherical enamel cells could reproduce and multiply in an oxygen-deprived environment. However, when observing rice fermentation brine, those round cells are overwhelmed by large rod-shaped organisms. Finding this quite strange, the scientists decided to delve deeper into milk, a food that is inherently highly perishable. Louis Pasteur also observed that when milk turned sour, numerous spherical cells appeared, identical to those that caused the fermentation of beet sugar solutions. From that point, he asserted that fermentation is caused by microorganisms. Lewis' subsequent experiments yielded similar results. From this, he conclusively affirmed that sterilization is an essential requirement for preserving the solution. Thanks to this scientist's method, food could be preserved for longer. However, what does Louis Pasteur's research have to do with going to school? At its core, his research provided the answers to humanity's most pressing questions of that era. All diseases originate from specific life forms, rather than arising from unscientific factors like myospa, which humans previously believed. Lewis, however, was not the one who made that statement. Robert Koch was the one who succeeded him in proving this hypothesis. Typhoid fever, a very common disease at the time, was the starting point for the scientist's research. It is believed that plant pathogens originate from the soil and from fields frequently used for livestock grazing. To search for evidence, Robert transfused blood from a sheep that had died of the disease into a mouse. No one expected it to die just a few days later. Upon dissecting the mouse, he discovered rod-shaped structures in its blood, spleen, and lymph nodes. The scientist continued injecting blood from this animal into a second mouse, and the experimental results repeated similarly after dozens of attempts. Thanks to this, he was able to conclude that bacteria were the cause of the disease, while also laying the groundwork for the birth of the Koch-based treatment method, thereby establishing the foundation for the treatment and prevention of infectious diseases. Black Death. However, these great achievements were still not the most significant breakthrough of human medicine during this period. By sheer chance, one of the miracles in the history of human development was discovered and became an essential element in medical practice. This is the German physicist Wilhelm Conrad Röntgen. In 1895, while conducting experiments with electrical currents passing through glass cathode ray tubes, he noticed the fluorescent screen at the other end of the room suddenly light up. It seems as though a beam of light is shining across the room. At that time, Röntgen did not yet fully understand those rays, so he temporarily named them X-rays. To investigate this mysterious light more thoroughly, he asked his wife to model, then directed X-rays onto her hand in the dark room. This painting is the direct result of that action. S. wife. Subsequently, this discovery was widely publicized. Diction Wilhelm replicated the experiment, causing another uproar in both the scientific community and public opinion. It was quickly adopted in Canada to locate a bullet lodged in a patient's leg. X-rays can penetrate skin and muscle but are absorbed by dense tissues like bones or cartilage. Thanks to this property, they produce images that clearly reveal internal injuries in the body, which are otherwise invisible to the naked eye. The technology developed by scientist Röntgen was quickly adopted widely and continues to develop robustly, serving the needs of human medicine. X-rays are commonly used in radiation therapy to treat cancerous tumors. Doctors will carefully calculate the necessary amount of radiation to treat a tumor. With a strength 150 times greater than conventional X-rays, they can completely destroy cancer cells within the tumor. In addition, modern medical equipment such as computed tomography, CORT, scanners or magnetic resonance imaging, MRI, machines that we commonly see today are also important applications of this special type of light. And that is precisely why X-rays are considered one of the greatest medical inventions of the 19th century. This will be one of the significant advancements, paving the way for future medical diagnosis and treatment technology. Throughout the 19th century, alongside a series of remarkable achievements, the medical field also presented much food for thought. Look at this chart, it shows the average age of the British population. In 1901, the average life expectancy was 47, but by 2000 this number had risen to 77, and by 2015 it was 81 years old. This confirms that after a century, the quality of medical and healthcare services has significantly improved. Indeed, the 20th century witnessed an explosion of research in the field of healthcare. Remarkably, in the face of the British people's achievements, Tia began to protect the affection she held for the people of this land. This confirms that, although it predates human achievement, it was inadvertently discovered through an occupational accident. That man was Alexander Fleming, a British scientist. In 1928, Fleming was primarily focused on researching bacteria, particularly Staphylococci, the culprit behind many types of infections. He cultivated them on agar plates to observe, but then accidentally neglected the experiment to enjoy his vacation. Upon returning to the laboratory, the scientist discovered that the petri dish had become contaminated with mold. However, interestingly, around the marked area, the Staphylococcus bacteria were either destroyed or unable to grow. This coincidence helped Fleming discover that this type of mold had the ability to destroy bacteria, and he named it penicillin. To test the hypothesis, he conducted further experiments and discovered that it could eliminate a wide range of disease-causing bacteria while remaining completely harmless to human cells. Although he had discovered the uses of penicillin, Fleming still faced significant difficulties in extracting and producing the substance on a large scale. It was not until 1938 that the unfinished experiment was resumed and further developed by more than 13 other scientists, including Howard Florey, Ernst Borischain, and Norman Heatley. From the mold discovered by Alexander Fleming, Norman cultivated it in flasks containing a solution of sugar and mineral salts, then used solvents like butanol to extract penicillin. In March 1940, researchers successfully extracted 100 milligrams of penicillin in the form of a brown powder and conducted tests on animals with this substance. They injected 8 white mice with a sufficient quantity of Streptococcus bacteria to be lethal. Among them, 2 were given an additional dose of penicillin, and 2 others received 5 small doses of penicillin at intervals over the following 10 hours. The result was that 4 untreated mice died, while all the others survived. Just 1 year later, the 3 scientists produced enough vaccine to conduct human trials and obtained very promising results. This special medication was quickly recognized. Thanks to improvements and support from the U.S. government, penicillin was mass-produced and widely used by the military during World War II. The discovery of penicillin paved the way for a series of research efforts to find new antibiotics, and the chart above is clear evidence of this drug's effectiveness. Not limited to antibiotics alone, as research technology continues to advance, humanity has achieved numerous other breakthroughs serving medical science. We have discovered the secret of life. That was the earth-shattering announcement made by 2 scientists, James Watson and Francis Crick. As predicted, this research has completely transformed our understanding of human origins, becoming a historic breakthrough. So what did the 2 scientists discover? Prior to James Watson and Francis Crick's announcement of the DNA structure model, the very concept of DNA, genetic material, was already known to the scientific community. However, its precise structure and mechanism of action remained a complete mystery. 2 scientists utilized various data sources, including X-ray images. As a result, the structure of the molecule was discovered. The structure of DNA consists of 2 strands forming a double helix, which run parallel to each other but in opposite directions around a central axis. The nitrogen bases in the middle are connected to each other according to the complementary principle, DNA, AT, GC, RNA, AU, GC. This arrangement ensures the uniform size of DNA molecules and their ability to store genetic information. Not only that, but Watson and Crick also realized that the very double helix structure of DNA creates its mechanism for self-replication. Each DNA strand serves as a template for synthesizing a new strand, while complementary base pairing ensures the accuracy of this replication process. This discovery not only addresses one of the greatest scientific questions but is also widely applied in various medical fields such as genetics and forensics. However, these remarkable medical achievements did not end with the 20th century. From the 1950s onward, humanity continued to make countless other great advances. The most remarkable is this child. They are not the possessor of special abilities nor a genius in any field, but their very existence is the miracle that humanity needs to learn from. On July 25, 1978, the international media descended upon Dahua Oham Hospital in Manchester. The reason was a unique event about to take place there. A baby girl named Louise Brown was born via cesarean section, weighing 2.6 kilograms and in perfect health. So why was the birth of a child like her such a uniquely celebrated event? Are your parents famous? Yes. The answer is no. Little Louise's birth was nothing short of a medical miracle. She was the world's first in vitro fertilization baby, paving the way for the birth of approximately 10 million other children through this method. Back in the 1970s, that was truly more than a miracle. And the creator of that miracle was scientist Robert Edwards. He collaborated with gynecologist Patrick Steptoe, an expert in laparoscopy, the key technique for retrieving eggs from a woman's ovaries. Rather than conceiving naturally, Robert opted for in vitro fertilization by culturing eggs and sperm. Once the embryo has developed stably, it will be transferred into the woman's uterine cavity. This method is called in vitro fertilization, also known as IVF. The method may sound simple to implement, but in reality, scientists encountered a great deal of difficulty. Between 1971 and 1977, Robert and Patrick performed a total of 64 unsuccessful gender reassignment surgeries. When the method was first published, it faced a great deal of criticism and backlash. At that time, people believed that artificial reproduction could create monstrous children, leading to severe consequences for humanity. However, the birth of Louis Breaux completely refuted that argument. This demonstrates that, although IVF techniques have been significantly refined, the fundamental procedure developed by Robert Edwards and Patrick Steptoe remains the foundation of modern assisted reproductive methods. Their success not only brings hope to millions of infertile couples but also marks a breakthrough in modern medicine. Alongside these achievements, the 20th century also faced certain difficulties. Most diseases at that time could be completely cured, but this was only true for countries with stable and developed economies and medical systems. In places like Africa, South America, and some regions of Asia, many dangerous diseases are still rampant. These are flagellates, the food of amoebas, the prey of amoebas. However, they are precisely the root cause of the century's disease that humanity must confront. This condition occurs when a person already infected with the hepatitis B virus, HBV, becomes exposed to an additionally infected with the hepatitis D virus, HDV. This type of virus can only invade and replicate within the body of a person who already has HBV. This combination leads to a more severe infection, causing a rapid deterioration of the immune system and potentially resulting in death. From the 1960s to the 1970s, HIV began to spread to other countries, particularly the Caribbean region and the United States, through infected individuals. By the late 1980s, HIV had become a global pandemic, which was particularly devastating to countries in the sub-Saharan African region. The danger and rapid spread of this virus have become a tremendous challenge for global medicine. The 21st century is an era where humanity strives to find solutions to the difficult problem of HDV, while continuously improving and developing methods for the early diagnosis of other diseases. As hope, designed to instruct the body. Even during the recent COVID-19 pandemic, this vaccine immediately demonstrated its effectiveness and had the opportunity to prove its value. Moreover, scientists need to apply MENA technology to predict malignant diseases, which are the leading cause of death worldwide. Now, all of these pandemic prevention measures have proven effective. Therefore, scientists need to apply MENA technology to predict malignant diseases, which are the leading cause of death worldwide. Scientists also expect that this special vaccine will generate antigens, substances capable of stimulating the immune system to produce a response, with a mechanism of action similar to that of the HDV virus. This can help the body produce neutralizing antibodies capable of fighting off disease. If successful, MENA could usher in a new era for the modern medical revolution, contributing to the extension of human life. However, this technology still faces many challenges in the future. Although the COVID-19 vaccine does not cause widespread serious side effects. However, this conclusion may not apply to other MENA antibiotics and requires further research time for verification. Only time will tell how this story ends. However, despite striving to live a full life and implementing numerous disease prevention and treatment measures, but the cycle of birth, old age, sickness, and death remains an immutable natural law. Thanks to advanced techniques, a recent research team at the Babraham Institute in the UK, A breakthrough has been made in the field of medicine. That is regenerative medicine, a specialized field that has only emerged in recent times. Typically, as humans age, errors appear in the cell's genetic code, gradually leading to degeneration. Replacing and renewing them helps regenerate cells. Not only are they younger, but they also function like young cells in every way. Moreover, in the future, these methods also hold the potential to be applied in treating age-related diseases or disorders. So perhaps eating starfruit brings dreams. Although highly promising, the mechanism behind cellular reprogramming is not yet fully understood. However, it's only a matter of time. If successful, this method could truly become a turning point, transforming the landscape of global medicine. That alone was not enough. The healthcare system achieved another breakthrough: organ transplant techniques. Although the first head transplants were performed by humans in 1995. However, with the advancement of technology and awareness, it can be affirmed that most parts of the human body can be replaced. This has been somewhat demonstrated by the world's first face transplant. A 38-year-old woman, Isabelle Denoit, lost part of her nose, lip, and chin after being attacked by a dog. The patient was immediately taken to the operating room, and the surgery was performed by a team of doctors led by Bernat de Waal and Virginie Michael de Bernat. Due to the severe injuries on her face, the doctors decided to perform a new face transplant surgery for Isabelle. However, this process is extremely complex and requires close coordination from numerous specialists. But that could not trouble the two talented doctors. They proceeded to remove the damaged tissue with the utmost care. Subsequently, they proceeded to transplant tissues from the donor, including skin and bone. Specifically, reconnecting blood vessels and nerves is a crucial step to ensure the graft can survive and function normally in the recipient's body. Fortunately, after 15 hours on the operating table, Isabelle was out of danger and began her recovery. The entire merger plan was successful, becoming a bright spot in the education sector, but it also revealed considerable risks and limitations. The greatest concern in transplantation is the risk of organ rejection, which occurs when the recipient's immune system attacks the transplanted tissues, perceiving them as foreign objects. To prevent this condition, the only solution is for the patient to take immunosuppressant drugs for life and accept their serious side effects. Isabelle herself also had to endure significant psychological turmoil as she adjusted to a completely new face. After all, the world's first face transplant in 2005 stands as a testament to the remarkable progress of modern medicine. It not only brings hope to those with facial deformities, but also opens up